The hot sun beat down on the alien desert, casting a strange orange glow over the barren landscape. Sand stretched for miles, broken only by jagged rocks and the distant flicker of heat rising from the ground. In the center of it all stood a massive stone structure, the fire pit where the fate of many would be decided. Today it was the turn of a tiny alien girl, her arms bound tight behind her back, her feet dragging across the dirt as alien guards shoved her forward. She was small, barely more than a child in their eyes, but the way they treated her made it clear she was nothing more than an object to be burned. The girl's heart raced in her chest, her mind screaming for escape, but her body refused to cooperate. She had seen others in the same situation, trapped, helpless, awaiting their fiery end. There was no hope, only the suffocating reality of what was coming. She had learned long ago to accept her fate. The guards around her laughed, their cold, mocking voices echoing off the stone walls. They spoke in a language she didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. They were enjoying her fear. One of the guards kicked her legs, sending her stumbling toward the pit. She could feel the heat from the flames even before she reached it, the smell of burning flesh lingering in the air. The girl's eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't save her. She had seen too much to believe in, mercy, too much to hold on to any hope. She had been captured months ago, brought here by the ruthless aliens who had enslaved her people. Now it was her turn to burn. No one would save her. No one ever did. But just as she reached the edge of the pit, something unexpected happened. A strange sound echoed across the desert, faint at first but growing louder. It was the sound of engines, a noise she hadn't heard in a long time. It was like nothing she had ever known, almost like a hum, but with a steady rhythm that seemed to shake the very air. The guards stopped in their tracks, their heads turning toward the sound. "What's that?" one of them muttered, his voice filled with confusion and sudden unease. The girl's heart skipped a beat. She had never known anything to come here, no ships, no travelers, nothing. The fire pit was in the middle of nowhere, and no one would dare come to this forsaken place. Yet the sound grew louder, closer. It was coming from above. The girl tried to stand taller, her mind spinning with questions, but the ropes around her wrists bit into her skin, pulling her back down. The guards stepped back, whispering among themselves. They looked around nervously, unsure what was happening. Then it appeared, a sleek, silver ship, cutting through the sky like a knife through cloth. It was nothing like the alien ships she had seen before. This one was different, its design smooth and elegant, with lines that shimmered as though the very air around it bent to its will. The ship hovered for a moment, casting a shadow over the fire pit. The girl's breath caught in her throat. This was not a rescue, she thought. It had to be a mistake. But still, she couldn't help herself. A tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. The guards stared at the ship, their faces filled with fear. They had never seen anything like it. The alien girl could hear their panicked voices, but she couldn't make out the words. They were too afraid to approach it. Suddenly the ship landed, dust rising in a swirl of wind as it touched down with a soft thud. The air grew colder, as if something powerful had just arrived. And then, the hatch opened. A figure stepped out, tall and strong, silhouetted by the light of the setting sun. At first, the girl couldn't make out who or what it was, but the figure moved with purpose, every step firm and determined. The alien guards raised their weapons, their eyes narrowed in suspicion and fear. "Who dares to—" one of the guards began, but his voice trailed off when he saw the figure up close. The man who emerged from the ship was unlike anyone the girl had ever seen. He was human, no horns, no alien features, just a man. But what set him apart was the way he carried himself. There was something in his eyes, something that radiated strength, as if he had seen the worst the universe had to offer and had come out the other side. His clothes were simple, but his stance was that of someone who had been in battles, who had faced death and come back for more. The girl's heart raced again, but this time it was different. There was something in his presence, something she couldn't explain, that made her believe just for a moment that she might have a chance. The guards hesitated. They had no idea who this man was or what he wanted, but the fear in their eyes was undeniable. They had been confident moments before, ready to throw the girl into the flames. Now they were unsure. The man took a step forward, his gaze fixed on the alien girl. He saw her bound, her small form trembling, but there was no time to dwell on that. His eyes narrowed as he looked at the guards. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough to make them back away slowly. And then, without a word, he reached into a pouch at his side and pulled out a weapon that hummed with energy. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Could this be her chance? Could this human actually save her? She couldn't afford to believe it, not yet. But as she watched him, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. This time it wasn't just the fire pit that was burning. It was her heart, catching fire for the first time in what felt like forever. The man's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Could he really be the one to save her? The quiet hum of the ship's engine still echoed in the desert, its sound hanging in the air like an ominous reminder of the unexpected arrival. The guards, still unsure of what to do, stood frozen, their weapons raised, but their hands trembling. The human man standing tall before them seemed to disregard the threat completely. His eyes didn't flicker, his stance remained unshaken. "Who are you?" one of the alien guards demanded, his voice full of both disbelief and fear. "What do you want?" The man's gaze remained fixed on the girl who, despite her fear, could sense something powerful about him. He didn't even acknowledge the guard's question at first. Instead, his focus was entirely on her, the trembling, captive alien girl who had been moments away from a gruesome fate. His eyes softened for a moment, the tiniest hint of compassion showing in the way he looked at her. The human reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked simple at first, nothing like the advanced alien technology the guards were used to. But when the device powered on, a pulse of light shot out, a low hum vibrating the ground beneath them. The guards flinched back, momentarily blinded by the flash. Before they could react, the human was moving. His hand shot out, and the device whirred. A sharp beam of energy sliced through the air, and one of the alien guards who had stepped too close to him dropped to the ground with a yelp. The others hesitated, their eyes flickering between the fallen comrade and the human. The man didn't flinch. His calm demeanor was like a force of nature itself. He stepped forward slowly, his boots kicking up the dust in the quiet desert air. The guards held their ground, but their eyes were wide now, their confidence slipping away as the human moved closer, his weapon ready. "You won't get away with this," one of the guards spat, but his voice was shaking. The human didn't respond. Instead, he focused his attention on the device again, and with a flick of his wrist, the weapon emitted another sharp pulse. This time, it struck one of the guard's weapons, sending it flying from his hand. The guard's eyes widened in shock, his arm instinctively reaching out to grab the now powerless gun. With a single movement, the human stepped in front of the girl, blocking the guard's view of her. His presence was imposing, his face set in determination, and for a brief moment everything around him seemed to stop. The wind died down. The fire pit, once a place of certain doom, was now a forgotten thing. The girl's heart hammered in, her chest unsure of what to make of this sudden turn of events. Could he really be the one to save her? "Stay behind me," the human said in a low, calm voice, though there was a quiet command to it. His words sent a ripple of reassurance through her, though she was still uncertain. She had been through so much already, and the idea of hope was foreign. She wasn't used to being saved. She wasn't used to being anything other than an object, to be discarded. The guards seemed unsure now, their eyes darting between the human and their weapons. They looked at each other, murmuring in a strange tongue as though calculating whether they could take this man down. But with each passing second, their confidence waned. The human wasn't like anyone they had seen before. His energy, his calm power, it unnerved them. This wasn't a prisoner or a slave, this was something else. "Who are you?" another guard asked, voice laced with fear. "What do you want with her?" The human glanced at the girl briefly, his eyes softening once more before he finally spoke. "I'm here to make sure you don't hurt her," he said, his voice unwavering. "And I will stop you if I must." The guards shifted uneasily, knowing they were out of their depth. They had expected a quick, easy sacrifice. They hadn't prepared for a human, a warrior, standing in their way. The girl's heart raced faster at the sound of his voice. Was this real? Could this man truly be her salvation? One of the guards, anger rising in his chest, lunged toward the human, his fist aimed to strike, but the human was faster. Guard cry. He sidestepped the attack effortlessly, grabbing the alien by the arm and twisting it behind his back with a sharp motion. The guard cried out, but the human didn't stop. In one fluid motion, he threw the alien to the ground, pinning him with a booted foot. The other guards stepped back, eyes wide. They had been trained to deal with prisoners, slaves, and any kind of alien threat. But they had never seen someone move like this. So fast, so precise. The human wasn't just a hero. He was a force of nature. "Stay down," the human said coldly, as he kept the guard pinned under his foot. The remaining two guards hesitated, the shock from watching their companion fall so quickly still fresh in their minds. But they weren't prepared to back down. One of them raised his weapon, aiming it directly at the human. "You won't win this," the guard growled, his hands shaking. "You're alone, and we have the fire pit on our side." The human's lips curled into a smile, his eyes still locked onto the girl. "I don't need anyone but myself," he said quietly, his voice steady. "And I don't need your fire pit. It's you who will regret underestimating me." With that, he turned and took a step forward. The other guards scrambled to react, but it was too late. The human was already on them, his weapon flashing with energy. One by one, the aliens were disarmed and thrown aside. Their confidence shattered, their once proud postures replaced by fear. The girl watched in stunned silence, disbelief washing over her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of something new. Hope. The human had come to her aid. Could it be? Could he really be her savior? The battle was over in moments. The guards lay scattered on the ground, no longer a threat. The human stood tall, breathing steadily, his face expressionless. But his eyes, they were filled with something she couldn't quite understand, something soft, but strong. He had just saved her life. "You're free," the human said, turning to face her at last. The girl's throat tightened as she looked up at him, barely able to speak. She was still shaking, still trying to process the fact that she was alive. And in that moment, for the first time in so long, she allowed herself to believe that she might just be free. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The human smiled faintly, his eyes meeting hers. "I'm the one who just saved your life," he said simply. "And I'm not going anywhere." The desert wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying the scent of smoke and the distant sounds of chaos. The alien girl's pulse still raced in her chest, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She had been seconds away from being sacrificed, and now here she was, standing in front of the human who had just saved her. The fire pit, once a symbol of inevitable death, had now become a distant nightmare. But even as she tried to understand the enormity of her salvation, a sense of unease settled deep within her. The danger wasn't over. The guards she had seen, the ones who had almost ended her life, weren't the only threat. There was still more to come. "Stay close," the human commanded softly, his voice still calm, but carrying an undeniable authority. His eyes never left the horizon, scanning for any sign of movement. "We need to move now." The girl nodded instinctively, her legs shaking beneath her. She could barely comprehend what was happening, but one thing was clear. He had just saved her life, and now it was her turn to trust him. She moved closer to him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The human was already moving swiftly, his boots kicking up dust as he glanced back at her. There was no hesitation in his steps. His entire being was focused on survival, not just for himself, but for her as well. "We can't stay here," The human said, his voice steady but urgent. They'll be back, and this time they'll bring more than just their guns. The girl's heart skipped a beat. More? Was there even more danger than she had already faced? She wanted to ask, wanted to know what was going to happen next, but she could barely find the words. She didn't understand how to trust again. In her life, everyone had betrayed her, and now here was this human, this stranger who seemed to be offering her something she hadn't dared hope for. A chance to survive. They didn't talk as they moved, the only sound the crunch of sand beneath their feet and the occasional rustle of the wind. The girl kept her head low, eyes darting nervously as they made their way into the rocky outcrop. Her eyes flicked over the human's broad back, his tense shoulders, the weapon still held tight in his hands. She had no idea where they were going. All she knew was that the human didn't stop moving, didn't slow down. As they reached a narrow pass between two large rocks, the human suddenly stopped. His body went still, every muscle tensed. The girl stopped too, her breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, but he was staring ahead, focused entirely on something beyond her reach. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw the dark shapes emerging from the distance. More alien guards, this time accompanied by larger, more formidable creatures. They moved with purpose, marching toward them. There was no mistaking their intent. They were coming to finish what they had started. And this time, they weren't going to let anyone escape. The girl's stomach tightened, fear clawing at her chest. The last time, the human had been able to overpower them. But could he do it again? Could he protect her from this new threat? Stay behind me, the human said without looking at her. And don't make a sound. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. A promise of action, of danger. The girl barely had time to nod before the human turned, disappearing into the shadows of the rocks. She followed quickly, trying to keep up, but the fear in her chest was overwhelming. The alien guards were closing in, their weapons raised, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. The girl's heart beat faster, louder now. She couldn't stop her legs from trembling. She had never run from danger before. It had always been too late for that. But this time she had someone on her side. She couldn't afford to fail him. As they moved deeper into the rocky terrain, the human signaled for her to stop. He crouched low behind a boulder, pulling her down beside him. She could hear the guards, voices now. Their alien language a blur of incomprehensible sounds. They were getting closer, closer to the narrow pass where they were hiding. The human's hand was steady on his weapon, his face expressionless, his eyes narrowed with focus. The girl tried to steady her breath, pressing herself closer to the cold rock. She was terrified, more terrified than she had ever been, but the human was here, and he wasn't afraid. He was ready to fight. The guards' footsteps grew louder, closer, their voices growing clearer. The girl could make out the words now, threats, curses, promises of death. But even as the sound of the guard's approach echoed in her ears, she felt something inside her shift. She was afraid, yes, but there was something else too. A quiet hope that began to flicker in the back of her mind. They weren't going to die here. She wouldn't die. Not if the human had anything to say about it. The first guard came into view, his towering form moving slowly, scanning the ground, his weapon raised. The girl's breath hitched as he came closer, so close she could hear the heavy thud of his boots on the sand. He stopped directly in front of the boulder, peering out into the distance. The human didn't move. He was like a shadow, silent and still. The girl held her breath, not daring to make a sound, not even a whisper. And then, in an instant, the human was on him. He sprang from his hiding spot, his body moving with the speed and precision of someone who had done this 100 times before. The guard didn't have time to react. The human's weapon hummed with energy as it released a blast of light, striking the alien in the chest. He crumpled to the ground without a sound, the only noise the thud of his body hitting the sand. The girl gasped, but the human's hand shot up, signaling for her to stay quiet. Her eyes locked with his, and in that brief moment, she understood. This was no accident. The human wasn't just trying to survive. He was here to fight. Fight for Her for anyone who had ever been enslaved or betrayed. But they weren't safe yet. The rest of the guards were still coming. "Get ready," the human whispered, his voice low, like a calm before the storm. The girl nodded, her body trembling but her spirit igniting. She was no longer a victim waiting for death. She was alive, and this battle for survival was only just beginning. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows across the rocky pass where the human and the alien girl had taken refuge. The air was thick with tension, and every small sound seemed to echo in the silent desert. The guards were still out there, their presence an ever-growing threat. But now, more than ever, the girl could feel the pull of something different, something new. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had a purpose. She was alive, and she wasn't ready to just surrender again. The human had proven himself time and time again. His calm presence in the face of danger was something she had never experienced before, and it ignited a spark of hope inside her, no matter how small it seemed. Her mind screamed at her to stay hidden, to stay silent, but her body refused to remain still. Every part of her wanted to act, wanted to escape. The human's focus remained unwavering, his eyes never straying from the shadows beyond the rocks. He was waiting, preparing for the next move. The alien girl watched him, her breath shallow, heart pounding in her chest. She knew they had to keep moving, but she also knew they couldn't rush into the open without risking death. The guards were close now, and if they weren't careful, it would all be over in a heartbeat. "They're getting closer," the human murmured, his voice barely more than a whisper. He glanced at her, his expression soft but determined. "I need you to stay close. Do exactly as I say." She nodded, though she couldn't find the words to respond. The weight of the situation pressed on her chest. The plan was simple: get to higher ground where they could see the approaching guards and be able to defend themselves if needed. But the path to safety was anything but straightforward. With a swift, fluid movement, the human began to move. Again, his body low and agile as he crouched behind the rocks, signaling for her to follow. The alien girl took a deep breath and followed his lead, her feet barely making a sound on the ground as she mimicked his movements. The world around them felt smaller now. Each step measured, each breath a carefully calculated risk. As they reached the base of the ridge, the human paused, holding up his hand. The alien girl froze, instinctively pressing herself against the rock, her heart racing. She could hear the guards now, their voices low but unmistakable, their laughter carried on the wind. They were close, too close. The girl's chest tightened in fear. Would they hear them? Could they track them here? The human's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene ahead. The ridge they were trying to climb was steep, and though it would offer them the vantage point they needed, it also left them exposed. There was no cover up there. Once they were on the ridge, they would be visible to anyone below. The girl's mind raced with possibilities, and then, without a word, the human motioned to her. "We go now," he whispered. In that moment, she understood. There was no waiting, no more hiding. It was time to make a move. They moved fast, scaling the rocky slope with agility that belied the danger surrounding them. The human moved with practiced ease, his every step calculated, while the alien girl struggled to keep up. She was small, her legs shorter, her body weaker, but she pushed herself forward. She couldn't afford to fall behind. Not now. Not when her survival depended on every ounce of her strength. The wind whipped around them as they neared the top of the ridge. The view opened up before them like a vast, empty canvas, but the girl barely had time to appreciate the sight. The guards were still close. They hadn't yet realized the two fugitives had taken the high ground, and in this moment the girl knew their only chance of survival lay in the human's hands. The idea of trusting him completely was still strange to her, but, in this moment, it was the only thing that made sense. They reached the top and the girl gasped for breath, her heart still pounding in her chest. She glanced back at the human, who was already crouching, his eyes scanning the terrain below them. The sound of the guards' footsteps grew louder, their voices still a mix of angry commands and frustration. They had to be close. "Stay down," the human instructed, his voice low, his tone urgent. "If we're quiet enough, they won't know. We're here." The alien girl nodded, though every nerve in her body screamed at her to move. She was used to being on the run, to being chased. But this was different. The fear she had once felt was now something else. A burning desire to live, to escape. The human was her chance. The only chance. They waited in the silence, the wind, now howling around them, their breath steady as they lay flat against the cold rock. Below them, the alien guards moved closer. Their footsteps were heavy, their voices sharp with frustration. They had been searching for the girl for hours, and they knew time was running out. The girl's heart skipped a beat when one of the guards stopped directly beneath them. She could hear him muttering to his comrades in anger, as if searching for any clue that would lead him to them. His footsteps came closer, and for a moment the girl was sure he would look up. But the human beside her didn't move, didn't even breathe louder. He was still, his focus unbroken. The guard stood, still for a long moment, his head tilted upward. The girl's stomach churned with fear. If he looked up even once, they would be caught. There was no escape. She braced herself for the inevitable sound of blaster fire, but it never came. Finally, the guard let out a frustrated growl, muttering something in his language, and turned to leave. The other guards followed, their voices fading as they moved farther into the desert. The girl released the breath she had been holding, her body shaking with the adrenaline that had surged through her during those long moments of fear. She was alive. She was still alive. The human remained still, his eyes never leaving the horizon, his body tense as if waiting for any sign of danger. The girl could feel the weight of the silence between them, the air thick with both relief and the realization that they weren't out of danger yet. The guards would be back, and next time, they might not be so easy to evade. "That was too close," the human muttered, finally breaking the silence. He turned to her, his eyes softening for a moment, though his tone was still firm. "We need to move again. Keep your eyes open." The alien girl nodded, her hands still trembling from the fear and relief. She had been saved once again. But the fight wasn't over. The human had shown her what it meant to fight, to survive. And in that moment, she made a silent vow. She would fight too. For him, for herself, and for the future that still lay ahead. They couldn't stay in this place for long. There was no time to rest. Their escape had only just begun. The rocky ridge was quiet now, the desert wind carrying away the last traces of the alien guard's pursuit. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange hue over the vast, empty expanse. The alien girl sat in the shadow of a large boulder, her body aching from the strain of the escape. She hadn't realized how much of herself she had left behind in the desert until she allowed herself a moment to stop and rest. Her eyes drifted over to the human, who stood a few paces away, surveying the horizon with a gaze that never seemed to falter. She had so many questions. She had been too afraid, too stunned to ask him before. But now, with a brief moment of safety, the questions burned in her mind. Who was he? Why had he risked everything to save her? What did he want from her, if anything? Could he really be trusted, or was this just another strange twist of fate meant to lead her to another dead end? The human turned to face her, his sharp eyes meeting hers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, an understanding passing between them. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes. He had known she would ask the question soon. It was only natural. He had been a stranger to her, a mysterious figure who appeared from the shadows and had altered the course of her life in a matter of moments. But there was more to the story, more than she could possibly understand in this moment. He took a step closer, his voice steady but gentle. "I think it's time we talk." The alien girl flinched slightly, unsure of what he meant. She had no idea how much she truly wanted to know, but a part of her knew this conversation was inevitable. She couldn't run from the truth anymore, and she couldn't hide her curiosity. The human had saved her life twice already, and she couldn't keep pretending she had nothing to gain by trusting him. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why? The human looked at her with a steady gaze, his expression unreadable. You're right. I don't owe you anything. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you die. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had always been taught that survival was a solitary thing, that you either fought for yourself or didn't fight at all. No one had ever fought for her, and she certainly hadn't ever expected anyone to. But here he was, standing before her, offering her something that seemed so simple, so human, a chance at life. He paused, the silence between them thick with unspoken truths. I've seen too much death in my life, he continued, his voice softer now. Too many people left behind, too many people forgotten. I can't stand by and watch it happen again. The alien girl's mind spun with confusion. Death. Forgotten. Had he lost someone? Was that why he was here, saving her? Or was there something else, something deeper driving him? Who are you? She asked, her voice trembling with the weight of her own unspoken fears. Why are you doing this? The human's face hardened for a moment, a flicker of pain passing across his features. He took a deep breath, the tension in his shoulders, relaxing as he finally spoke, the words slow and deliberate. My name is Jax. I used to be a soldier. A long time ago. I was part of a unit sent to hunt down alien traffickers, people who sell others like cattle. He paused, his eyes distant, lost in a memory. I was good at my job. I didn't ask questions, I just followed orders. The girl didn't speak. She didn't know how to react. She had never encountered a human soldier before, but the coldness in his voice, the way he spoke about his past, made her think of the alien guards she had known, their hearts hardened by years of cruelty. Was he any different from them? Then one day I came across a group of aliens. Jax continued, his voice breaking slightly. They were prisoners, just like you. But they weren't treated like you. They were forced to work for their captors. They weren't given a choice. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. I should have reported them. I should have followed orders. But I didn't. I couldn't. And by the time I realized what I had done, it was too late. The alien girl's eyes widened. She had never heard anything like this. Humans who cared about others? Humans who could feel empathy? Was it possible? Jax's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw the deep regret in them. I failed them. I didn't save them. And now I'm here because I refuse to let that happen again. Not to you, not to anyone. The girl took a step closer, her mind racing. So you're not just here to save me. You're here to stop them. Jax nodded, his eyes narrowing. Yes, I'm here to stop the people who think they can enslave others. People like them. He pointed to the distant horizon where the alien guards had disappeared. They won't stop looking for you, they'll keep coming, and when they do, I'll be ready. For a long moment, the girl was silent, the weight of his words settling heavily on her chest. She had never thought about it like that, had never considered that there were people out there who wanted to fight for her, who cared about something more than just surviving. But Jax wasn't just talking about her. He was talking about everyone who had suffered, everyone who had been oppressed. And what about you? She asked, her voice small. What do you want from me? Jax looked at her, his eyes softening. Nothing. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to survive. I want you to have a choice. He gave a small, crooked smile. Maybe one day you'll find your own reason to fight, but until then you're not alone. The alien girl's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. She had never trusted anyone, not fully. But something about Jax's words felt different. She didn't know where this journey would take them, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in her life, she had someone to stand beside her, someone who believed in her. And that, she realized, was more powerful than anything she had ever known. Then let's fight, she said softly, her voice steady with newfound resolve. Jax nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet understanding. Together, they would face whatever came next. And this time she would not be afraid to fight back. The moonlight bathed the desert in an eerie glow, casting long, shadowy fingers across the jagged landscape. The night had fallen quickly, but the danger hadn't disappeared. The alien girl could still hear the distant echoes of footsteps, heavy and deliberate. They weren't far. The human hero, Jax, stood at the edge of their small camp, his eyes scanning the horizon with a steely determination. Every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring, ready to snap into action at a moment's notice. The alien girl sat quietly, her back pressed against a large rock, her mind racing. She had never been one to rely on others, especially not after everything she'd been through. But there was something about Jax. There was something in the way he moved, in the way he looked at her that made her believe, just for a moment, that she wasn't alone. That maybe, just maybe, there was hope. But hope was a fragile thing, easily crushed by the harsh reality of the universe. "How long until they find us?" she asked quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. Jax didn't turn around immediately, his focus still on the vast desert stretching out before them. His fingers gripped the handle of his weapon, the only thing he could rely on in a situation like this. "They're getting close," he muttered, his voice low, barely audible. "Closer than I'd like. We can't afford to stay here much longer." The alien girl's eyes narrowed as she tried to peer into the distance. She could just make out the outline of the alien ships in the sky, their sleek, ominous shapes cutting through the dark expanse like predators hunting their prey. The enemy wasn't just following them. They were hunting them down methodically with a precision that made her stomach churn. These were not the usual slave traders or opportunistic bandits. These were professionals, dangerous, deadly, and relentless. "We'll have to fight our way out," Jax said, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "I don't like it, but it's our only option." The alien girl felt a knot form in her stomach. She had never fought before. Not like this. She was small, vulnerable, and her body ached from the long journey, the constant fear of being hunted. She had been a captive her entire life, and while she had fought to survive, she had never experienced anything like what Jax had done. The battle they were about to face was not one she felt ready for. But Jax's eyes met hers, and in them, she saw something that made her heart race. It wasn't just strength. It was trust. He trusted her. He believed in her. And that belief was something she had never had, not from anyone. "We can do this," Jax said with a quiet conviction, as if sensing her hesitation. "I won't let them take you, not now, not ever." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. His words filled her with a strange sense of courage, something she had buried deep inside herself for years. She had survived because she had been forced to. But now she had a reason to fight, not just for survival, but for something more. She wasn't going to let the alien forces destroy everything she had fought for. She wasn't going to let them take Jax away either. "I'm with you," she said softly, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Let's do this." Jax nodded, a flicker of something, pride maybe, passing through his expression. He turned away from her, his gaze shifting back to the distant enemy forces. "We don't have much time. Get ready. They'll be here. Soon." He moved quickly, gathering what little gear they had left, checking his weapon, and making sure the alien girl had everything she needed. Despite the gravity of their situation, there was a calmness about him, as if this was just another battle he had fought 1,000 times before, and maybe it was. He wasn't like any person she had ever met. He had a way of turning fear into focus, of making the impossible seem possible. And that's what they needed now. Focus, precision, and the strength to do what had to be done. The alien girl's heart beat faster as she stood up, her legs shaky from both the physical and emotional toll the past few days had taken on her. But she didn't hesitate. She couldn't afford to. Her life, her future depended on her moving forward, on her standing side by side with Jax. She might not have been a soldier, but she had something even more valuable: the will to fight. They moved quickly through the rocky terrain, staying low to avoid detection. Jax led the way, his every movement sharp and precise. He was already thinking 2 steps ahead, calculating their route, planning their escape. The alien girl followed closely, doing her best to mimic his movements. They were a team, even if she didn't fully understand how. As they approached a ridge, the sound of the enemy's ships grew louder, their engines thundering through the air like a storm approaching. The girl's heart raced in her chest. They were close now, too close. The enemy forces were circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Hold your position," Jax whispered, crouching behind a large boulder. He motioned for her to do the same, his eyes scanning the sky. "They'll be right on top of us." The girl's breath caught in her throat as she pressed herself against the cold rock. She could hear the ships now, the mechanical whine of their engines sending a chill through her. They were closing in from all sides, surrounding them in a way that seemed impossible to escape. She tried to push the fear away, focusing on the moment, on what had to be done. Then, without warning, Jax sprang into action. He leaped from behind the boulder, his weapon raised, and fired a precise shot at the closest enemy ship. The blast hit its mark, sending the vessel spiraling out of control and crashing to the ground with an explosive burst. The girl gasped, her eyes wide. It was the first time she had seen Jax in full combat mode, cold, efficient, and devastating. He wasn't just trying to survive. He was taking the fight to them. He was fighting for her, for their future. She didn't hesitate. She followed his lead, her hands shaking as she raised her weapon, aiming at the next ship that came into view. She fired, her shot finding its mark. The enemy vessel shuddered before plummeting to the ground in a burst of smoke and debris. For a moment, the world around her seemed to slow down. The desert air crackled with energy. The ships overhead roared with power, but they were faltering. She was no longer just running. She was fighting. And for the first time in her life, she felt powerful. But there was no time to dwell on the feeling of victory. The battle had just begun, and the enemy was regrouping. They weren't going to let 2 survivors escape so easily. Jax turned to her, his face lit by the glow of the burning wreckage. "Stay close, we're not done yet." With those words, the alien girl knew that their fight wasn't over, but as long as she had Jax by her side, she believed they could win. The battlefield was quiet now, the smoke of the wrecked alien ships rising into the starlit sky like a dark omen. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel and the acrid tang of scorched metal. The alien girl stood next to Jax, her heart still pounding, her body exhausted, but her spirit alive in a way she had never felt before. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a new beginning, a chance to break free from the chains that had held her entire life. Jax moved beside her, his movements calm, methodical, but there was a shift in his posture. A subtle sigh, a moment of relief that passed quickly. He had been here before, he had fought countless battles, faced death countless times, but this was different. This time, it wasn't just about fighting for survival. It was about fighting for something. "More, are they gone?" the alien girl asked, her voice hoarse from the chaos of the battle. Jax nodded, his eyes still scanning the horizon. "For now, but they'll be back. We need to keep moving." The girl felt a pang of fear, but it was different this time. It wasn't the paralyzing fear that had dominated her life for so long. It was the kind of fear that came with knowing what they were up against, but also knowing they could face it together. It was a strange kind of strength, a quiet confidence that had come from their shared fight. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice still shaky but gaining strength with each word. Jax looked at her, his expression softening, his gaze finally meeting hers with a depth of understanding. "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Together." The girl's heart fluttered at his words, but she pushed the feeling aside. She had no time for emotions, no time to dwell on the unexpected connection she felt with this human. But, as much as she tried to ignore it, the truth was undeniable. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for something bigger. She was fighting for the chance to live, to have a future, to be free. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a battle she would lose. They moved slowly through the wreckage, the once vibrant desert now eerily quiet in the aftermath of their confrontation. The alien girl felt a strange sense of peace, despite the destruction around them. It wasn't the peace of safety. It was the peace that came from knowing that for the first time in her life, she had a choice. She wasn't bound by fear anymore. She wasn't a captive, a slave to the forces that sought to control her. She was free. And that freedom had a price. Jack stopped suddenly, his hand on her arm. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "We're not done yet. We need to find shelter before the rest of them regroup." The alien girl nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The battle had been fierce, but the war was far from over. They were still being hunted, still running. But as she looked at Jax, she knew something had changed between them. They were no longer strangers, no longer two people thrown together by chance. They were partners, in every sense of the word. She looked up at the night sky, the stars shining brightly above them. It was a clear, vast expanse, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the enormity of the world beyond the desert, beyond the battlefield. There was so much she had never seen, so much she had never dreamed of. And yet, here she was, standing on the cusp of something new, something better. "We'll make it," she said, the words feeling strange and foreign on her tongue, but true nonetheless. "We'll survive. We'll get through this." Jax's eyes softened as he looked at her, the corners of his lips twitching upward in a small, tired smile. "That's the spirit," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "We'll get through this together." They continued on, moving carefully but with purpose. Each step felt like a victory, every small triumph a testament to their resilience, their will to survive. The girl didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. She wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. She had Jax by her side, and that made all the difference. They reached the edge of a small ravine, the shadows of the cliffs offering them a temporary respite from the open desert. Jax led the way down, the rocky terrain steep but manageable. As they reached the bottom, Jax turned to her, his expression serious once again. "Rest for now," he said. "We've earned it." The alien girl nodded, her body aching but a sense of peace settling over her. She sank down onto the ground, her legs giving way beneath her. Jax did the same, settling beside her, his back against the rock. For a long moment they didn't speak. There was no need for words. They had already said everything that needed to be said through their actions. The battle was over for now. And in that quiet moment, they allowed themselves the luxury of simply being. The girl closed her eyes, her mind drifting in the stillness of the desert night. The weight of everything that had happened, the capture, the escape, the battle, began to lift. She was no longer just a prisoner, no longer a victim of the forces that had once controlled her life. She was free, and in that freedom, there was power, there was hope, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future. She didn't know where this journey would take her or what the next battle would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer alone, and with Jax by her side she had something worth fighting for. As the night stretched on, the wind whispered through the ravine, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. The alien girl held her breath, her heart beating in time with the wind as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. They had made it through the night, and with each new day they would face whatever came next, together.